Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to my talk, Public Legal Infrastructure for Network Organizations. My name is Layer0. I am a Colombian lawyer and crypto passionate since 2017. Amigos argentinos, amigos latinoamericanos, un placer estar con ustedes. My crypto journey started with MakerDAO in year 2021. And as you probably all know, MakerDAO was the first big DAO experiment in the industry. In 2021, MakerDAO was run by a foundation which was dissolved, and the decision was to turn over operations to the DAO in 2021, and was the largest project managing real large volumes of capital that started this DAO experiment. And through these years, we discovered all the challenges that involves running operations through decentralized organizations. In 2023, we spinned off from MakerDAO as a separate team, which is called Powerhouse. And I am legal lead of Powerhouse. The core activities that we do is we design operational and legal infrastructure for MakerDAO and for the whole industry. And we discovered in our years at Maker what we call the tyranny of structurelessness. A bit idealistic, in 2021, the DAO thought, oh, it is enough to say, close the entity, close the foundation, give all the decision authority and operations to this decentralized organization, and they will take care of everything. But this is the receipt of trouble and challenges if the structure, if operational legal infrastructure is not put into place. So what are, of course, DAOs as a network organization are need to have legal entities for fulfilling their purposes. For DAOs to interact with the real world, they need legal vehicles, traditional legal entities, and legal contracts. For example, all DAOs need to structure relationship with contributors or with suppliers or with capital for the investors or with other type of service providers. DAOs also need to hold assets, especially intellectual property assets. For that, they need a legal entity. And very importantly, DAOs need to protect the participants, protect the contributors, which with no legal entity, then they're exposed to liability risks. So we have thought at Powerhouse what type of legal infrastructure DAOs need. And the first design principle that we thought important to include in the design is that legal infrastructure should mirror the network structure, which is based, as you know, in nodes and hubs. And here's like a typical development path of network organizations, which normally start with an unstructured mesh from nodes, which then start to synchronize and to coordinate around one hub. This is called the hub and spoke model, which later on deploys more specialized hubs in a multi-hub structure, and then could evolve into a more complex structure and redundant core periphery network. So we took this development path that networks follow and developed the legal infrastructure that is called the Scalable Network Organization model, also known as How Legal Can Save DAOs. So we start with the hubs. And just imagine that DAOs, such as any type of organization, needs to fulfill specific functions. So let's start with the procurement function. Any organization, including DAOs, needs to hire contributors, suppliers, people that work for the DAO. So this is called the procurement function. The procurement function is organized through the procurement hub. Is this a legal vehicle that will structure all the relationship with contributors, which could include hiring them, paying them, receiving invoices, and structuring the whole process of awarding projects, which could be grants or service agreements. So all of these activities will be coordinated by this procurement hub. And we already have a legal entity for that, that is a Swiss association that I will comment later on. So the first function is the procurement function, yeah, the suppliers of work. A second function, which is also important for every organization, is the sales function. So you can have a for-profit or a non-profit business. Any type of organization needs some type of income. It could be a service agreement, it could be a grant, it could be donation, but every organization needs to structure the revenues that flow to the system. For this function, we developed this hub, a sales hub, that we call the revenue generating hub. This hub will also have a legal entity, and is the one that structured this function and the relationship with paying customers. Okay? So we have the procurement function, we have the sales function, then we have the executive function. Of course, as any organization, you need an executive, you need a manager, you need someone that manages the treasury, you need someone that does fundraising. So we created this third hub. It's the executive hub. In our terminology, it's called the Operational Collateral Fund, the OCF. And this one is the one that will execute the decisions of the DAO, that will manage treasury and will coordinate the fundraising, like token issuance, and all of these activities. This is the executive hub. We have a fourth one, which is super important, which is the IP hub. For the IP hub, we have a separate legal vehicle which will own all the intellectual property assets, which could include copyrights, trademarks, patents, and so on. This entity will be the one that also safeguards the open source nature of all the software and will enforce the copyrights, and will police the infringement that third parties could violate these open source copyrights. So this IP, this is a separate function, and for that one, we also have created a prototype, a legal entity that will manage all the intellectual property topics. The fifth one, which is super important and is not well discussed and valued in the ecosystem, is the risk management function. Every organization needs to manage risk. So we have developed a specialized hub that manages risk and organize self-insurance and insurance for DAOs. For that one, we did a beautiful project for MakerDAO. I will comment later. It was a self-insurance fund where we provided vehicles for providing legal defense insurance and also liability, like D&O, insurance for managers, liability insurance, which is like a very, very big need of the industry, and I think unresolved need. Five functions. The sixth one is the governing function, which is a meta function. For that one, we don't consider that is needed a legal vehicle around it, but all the processes, which include the decision-making processes, the rules about dispute resolution, on-chain voting, and all of this. So far, so good? Six hubs. Then we have the nodes. Nodes are individual contributors. So each time that a contributor is involved in a DAO, will fulfill one of these 5 or 6 functions, or normally it could fulfill several simultaneously. Some will be contributors that provide work for the DAO. Some will have some like sales function, bringing revenue to the DAO. Someone will have some like management function. Someone will maybe manage IP or not, or maybe one node could fulfill different functions at the same time. So we classify the function that each contributor is fulfilling in the DAO. From you in the audience, who work in a DAO or has worked in a DAO? And what would be your role in one of these functions? Sales. Okay. And someone else? Sales too? Okay. So in our model, the hubs are coordination layers for nodes, for individual nodes, that enable nodes to structure their relationship, coordinate between themselves, and for each of these functions, we have templates, we have legal templates, blueprints, open source blueprints. So if you're going to fulfill a specific function, you say the software that we are building will give you all the templates that you need to incorporate your legal entity, to incorporate the legal agreements that you need for the specific function. Here in the screen, we see the first two products that we are going to launch next year. One is called the Embryonic Hub, which is a specialized hub for early stage networks. We decided to offer the first version as a Swiss association, which is a very flexible legal vehicle. I will comment on that later. As a legal vehicle, multi-purpose legal vehicle for initial DAO phases, development phases. The second one is the operational hub. That is the agreement here, the procurement hub, which is also a Swiss association, but specialized for contributors. For contributor, it could be a permanent team at a DAO that has a multi-sig and has no legal structure at all. Or it could be a temporary team that applies for a grant and needs some like basic legal structure around it. So this product, the Swiss Association Operational Hub, will provide you with a entity that you can create online, because for Swiss associations, you don't need to register in the commercial registry. So it could be like a software plugin. You can create the entity online, and you can create all the contracts online that you need for managing contributor teams. So this procurement hub, here's like a list of the things that you could do. It is a hub, it is a platform for structuring the procurement function of an organization. And for a DAO, it will include all the value chain of the procurement value chain. It will implement best practices of procurement according to what we have learned in public procurement law across the centuries. So it will help DAOs. DAOs oftentimes, as we have seen in the example of Maker, often have capital to invest, but don't have the capabilities or the structure to execute the project, to award it, to follow up on the deliverables, and so on. So this hub for the DAO will take the initial proposal, will help the DAO structure it in milestones and budgets, will help us to elaborate the eligibility criteria, what type of contributors are needed for a specific project, will help matchmaking the project with potential suppliers, and then also structuring all the operations, the legal contracts, once the project is awarded, the payment channels, managing the invoices, and so on. There will be like an additional one that is also important, that is like risk management. What happens if the supplier makes some damages to the organization? So there will be, like in public procurement law, there are some mechanisms like procurement bonds or insurances that manage the risk. What happens if there is some like liability issues with the service delivered? So that is going to be tackled by this procurement hub. Okay, the sales hub, as I mentioned, is the hub that will structure the relationship with clients. So for example, a DAO needs to have a front end, needs to publish terms and conditions, needs to sign some type of agreement, a grant agreement with another DAO or with a government, or a SLA, which is a service level agreement. Will need to receive invoices from clients or comply with local regulations. So this sales function is a very important one, because any DAO needs to generate revenue. And in our case, we are structuring the first one we call it a revenue generating hub in the BBI. And we are structuring that for our DAO, for Powerhouse DAO, as we are also bootstrapping our own DAO, and that will be like the commercial entity of our DAO. For this one, we will also offer a blueprint and like a template, standard template for DAOs to use. The executive hub will be the one that manages treasury, and also, like, very importantly, the executive function includes a process to return value to the contributors. And in a normal company, the problem with normal companies is that, so you have the shareholders, and the shareholders extract the value, so they are like inherently extractive. And not only that, in a commercial entity, you have managers that have fiduciary duties, which means that they are obliged legally to maximize the profit for their shareholders. So that's the problem with the normal, like traditional commercial legal vehicles. So what we want to do different here is that this function includes a revenue share mechanism, whereby a commercial entity that generates revenue returns value back to the contributors. So all the contributors will start accruing, we call it a PAUTI, a proof of work ticket token, that accrues the value and the time that contributors have put into the project. And that is an unresolved project in a problem in crypto, generally, like the problem of funding public goods and how to attest the value of a contribution to public goods. So this system, this executive hub, will maximize the value that is accrued by contributors. So we don't have any shareholders, we have contributors. So this is part of the executive hub, and the executive hub will also like organize the fundraising, token issuance, security token issuance, which is the aspect of the legal infrastructure which have more complex regulatory exposure. Okay, the IP hub, for managing IP, you need a centralized entity. And for managing open source copyrights, you probably need a neutral entity type. In our case, we're going to start with a foundation, which has as purpose to hold IP and ensure that the open source nature of the software will be respected. We have seen in the many cases that a project starts as a, like for example, the OpenAI case, that started as a nonprofit and then turned for profit, and then they started as an open source, and then they turned into closed source. So in order for this system to work, we have to give legal guarantees that the open source nature of the software will always be open source. For that reason, we need a specialized vehicle that holds this IP, that has at its purpose to enforce that the open source copyright will always be respected, and will manage all the licensing. And in the licensing, we will offer two types of licenses. One is a copyleft license, where the derivative works must be maintained open, and a normal commercial license. So it is viable and it is necessary to create viable business models, and one included to have commercial licenses where clients pay fees or royalties, and these fees and royalties will be directed to the contributors. And this one, the self-insurance hub, the insurance hub, as I mentioned earlier, for me is one of my favorite areas of development, because it is an unresolved problem in crypto. And basically it consists on a structure for putting some capital. And this capital, if you put it in a proper legal vehicle, you can go to the insurance market and get like normal insurance, but only if you have a self-insurance component. And we developed that for MakerDAO, but it could be a flexible instrument to cover any type of legal risk, which could be liability risk, which would be risk for the organization. What happens if the organization is sued? And if it doesn't have any proper structure, then the contributors could be personally liable. Or what happens if individual contributors or delegates are being sued? So all the aspects around legal defense, about legal representation, and also about like liability claims could be organized through the risk management hub. Exactly. So that was what I was explaining. We organized for Maker a 5 million USD legal defense fund, and how it works is that this self-insurance fund is a first loss fund, and you say the project covers up to, in this case, was 5 million legal defense. But what happens is that the legal defense cost could exceed that by far, especially in the US, could exceed by far. So this is not enough money to cover the whole risk. But you don't need to put all the money to cover all the risk, because you can leverage it. And you can say, put 5 million, put it as a self-insurance fund, and then go to insurance company, which will take this capital as a deductible. It's like a first layer of protection, and could also cover other risks that were not covered initially. So it is a very flexible instrument that could be used to structure a comprehensive risk management policy in a network. So that is insurance and the governance function, as I was mentioning, dispute resolution, decision making, voting, general like rules enforcement, and so on. So the last part of it is how everything comes together. So for every hub, we have a template, a blueprint, and then we will also have legal agreements that structure the relationship between the different hubs and between the hubs and the nodes. So we'll have licensing agreements, we will have IP assignment agreements, fee sharing, SAFT, which is a simple agreement for future tokens, that is a instrument used for fundraising, general contractor agreements, contributor agreements for the contributors, service agreements, service level agreements, terms of use. So the traditional legal agreements, but as open source templates, which could be, of course, customized for individual cases. And depending on the needs of the organization, they could be deployed and executed. So how we envision the development path of network organization is that they start with this like embryonic hub. And the embryonic hub is a very simple, lightweight entity. The first variation is a Swiss association, and it will be used in the initial phases of development where the project is not very complex or not like higher volumes are being flowed through the network. And when this organization grows or more money is flowing in, then the embryonic hub can spin off these specialized functions, and the network complexity scales as a function of growth. And as I said, not every organization needs to spin off different entities. Not every organization will need a separate vehicle for fundraising, for example, or for IP management. The embryonic hub could handle with constraint all of these 5 functions, but at a certain point, then it will be necessary that or recommendable that the organization spins off, outsource these functions, and then start developing this more complex and sophisticated network structure. This is the overview on the embryonic hub. There will be a product that we will launch next year. It's a Swiss association, and probably the Swiss association is the most suitable entity type in the world because you don't need to register it in the commercial registry. Initially, you could do it, but it's not required. You have legal personhood only like contractually. You don't need like filing or permission from a nation state. And it consists in like 3 basic components. One is like the multisig. The second is an agreement between the signers of the multisig. And the third one is the legal wrapper. So with this like proto entity, multi-purpose omnibus entity, you can start operations with a proper legal vehicle. And later on in the DAO development, then you can start spinning off functions as long as you require it. So that's what I have for you. Thank you very much.